I am going to share some ideas with you and some insights and some of my own personal story. Hopefully it will inspire you. Some of the tools I'll share with you may be new, may be empowering. It's kind of like coming to a place where everyone's done 100,000 workshops already, but I think I can share some new ideas with you. I want to share a chicken soup story with you. There was a story that was sent in by Norman Cousins, and Norman was the editor of Saturday Review magazine, and he coined the term psychoneuroimmunology. Your psyche, your attitude affects your neurosystem, affects your immune system. We know the more positive you are, the more optimistic you are, the higher your attitude is in terms of positive expectation and joy, the less ill you get, and then if you do get ill, you get better quicker. And he sent in this story called The Wee Nurse. Can I see a show of hands? How many of you have been in the hospital overnight? Can I see a show of hands? Have you ever had a wee nurse? A wee nurse comes in the morning and says, "Did we sleep okay last night? We didn't eat all our breakfast today, did we?" And a favorite one that he hated was she'd come in and say, "We haven't had our bowel movement yet today, have we?" And this "we" thing irritated him, and one day he decided he wanted to get back at her. So she came in and she had a little plastic cup and said, "We need a urine sample." And he said, "Okay, if you'll leave the room, we'll make one." So she left and went out in the hall. And he looked over on his breakfast tray, and it was a glass of apple juice, which he had not yet drunk. He took the apple juice, poured it into the specimen cup, rang the little buzzer. She came back in. He handed it to her. She looked at it and said, "My, we're a little cloudy today, aren't we?" He said, "Here, give it back." And he grabbed it back from her, took the cap off, and then proceeded to drink the whole thing down and said, "Let me run it through again for you. I'll see if I can make it come out clearer this time." Now, I was over in Bangkok. How many of you have been to Bangkok, Thailand? How many of you have seen the Golden Buddha? It's one of the 3 tourist attractions. You always see the Jade Buddha, the Golden Buddha, and the reclining Buddha, and that kind of thing. And this Buddha is 10.5 feet tall of solid gold. The gold value alone is about $196 million. That doesn't even count the artistic and the historical value. And when my wife was taking that picture, I was over next to I'd say about 5 feet away, there was a big glass case. And in that case, there was a piece of clay about 1 foot wide, 2 feet tall, 2 feet thick. And it said that in 1953, they did not know there was such a thing as a golden Buddha. They were moving this large clay Buddha from one side of Bangkok to the other to make room for a road that was coming through. And as they picked up the Buddha with the crane, because it was very heavy, a big crack went down through it. And as the crack went down through it, the head monk got scared and he lowered the Buddha down. And he said, "We'd better take a look at it and see if we've done any damage to it." And it started to rain, so they put a canvas over it to keep it dry. That night, the monk came out and he shined a flashlight in to see if it was staying dry, and something reflected back from inside the crack. He said, "Clay does not reflect light. There must be something else in there." And so the next morning, they chipped away in behind where they wouldn't see it if they made a mistake, and lo and behold, sure enough, was this golden Buddha. And their best theory is that 300 years earlier, when the Burmese were attacking Thailand, the monks of this monastery covered up the golden Buddha with clay to make it look worthless so they wouldn't steal it. They also think all the monks were killed in a massacre and the secret died with the monks. And then they rediscovered it. The word discover means what? Take the cover off of, discover something. It was always in there, but they took the cover off. I was having dinner with my wife that night, and she said, "Jack, that Buddha is like all the people in our seminars. They come in with this cover of clay of their negative beliefs, their self-doubt, their sense of guilt and shame, their beliefs that they're not enough, that they're not worthy, they don't deserve. And what we really do is we take the clay off so this golden essence can come and be there as who they are again, their true identity. It's not like we put anything in, it's just that we remove the things that are not there. I think Barbara talked a little about that earlier today. So as we go through this next hour and a half, think about and hold that metaphor, that image of the Buddha, and it could be the golden Christ, the golden Buddha, the Atman, the source, whatever you want to call it, but that's who you really are. And although we do a lot of things of giving you more information and tools and all of that, really if you were to stop doing the stuff that's negative, as Harv said, you've been defined. When you came in, you were just fine. And what we did was we layered on all that stuff. If we could just start to remove that and realize that everything you need is in you now. You have everything you need to do everything you want to do. It's just that we learn not to trust that. So we'll hold that as a metaphor. Now, you heard this morning, I was listening, I've got one of these great rooms right over here where I could sit in my room and listen to what was going on down here. And whoever was introducing in the morning said that you know about this combination lock idea. And I think you had, what is it, 10, 24/7? Yeah. And think about that model. I was eating dinner with a guy who's the Alabama State chess champion. We were talking about success. And he said, if you know the combination to the lock, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, young or old, male or female, if your IQ is 150 or your IQ is 50. If you know the combination, the lock has to open. And what I've discovered in my work, and I've been doing this work for 30 years. I started with a man named W. Clement Stone, who was worth $600 million back in 1968. And he taught me everything he knew about success, and I've been applying it to my own life and teaching it to others. And then I've done hundreds and hundreds of workshops where I've been the student and gone to India and studied with masters and so on over the years. But there is a combination, there is a system. If you know the combination, you can unlock success. The problem is many of us are missing a few of the numbers. And so what I'd like to do today is just kind of remind us and maybe share some of the new things that you might have forgotten. Now here's a man named J. Paul Getty. He was at once the richest man in America. And when they asked him what were the secrets of success, he said there are three. It's very simple. He said get up early, work hard, and find oil. Not that complicated. So obviously it's a little more tricky than that. At Keller Williams, they have a formula or a system. It's a real estate sales company. They said if you'll make 5 in-person sales calls and 10 over-the-phone calls every day, write 15 thank you notes to the 15 people you talk to, and view 5 new properties, that system always produces a high success rate in this company. So it's a system, it's a formula. Again, 5, 10, 15, 5. Again, this morning, 10, 24/7 that you've learned in Peak Potentials. So there are some formulas. Now, when I studied this, I came up with 64 universal principles that I've studied over the last 36 years. I don't expect to share all those with you today. Maybe we'll get through 9 if we're lucky. But this is a book I wrote called The Success Principles. It's now in 17 languages. You can see a couple of them up there. The one on the far left is in Russian. I was just speaking in Cannes last week in France to 6,500 women from Russia, the Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. I found out my name over there is Giek. Literally, we'd come out of the hotel and there'd be 500 women going, Giek, Giek, photo Giek, autograph Giek. And all of a sudden, I was really glad I'm not Brad Pitt, because you couldn't move. But anyway, this book has really taken Russia by storm. And there was one man stood up and he said, you know, I bought 100 copies of your book and gave them to everyone in my village, and our village has totally changed. We've changed how we're governing ourselves. We've changed how we're doing business. So we know these principles work universally. They're not just American principles. And I'll also share a little bit of some of the new ideas that I have about the law of attraction that has to come out of the secret. There's some things I think that are missing in that movie, things we said that the guy edited out that I think are useful to touch on. So that's where we'll be going today. Now, would you rather take the short route or the long route to success? Very good. Me too. Wouldn't it make sense to just go straight for the cheese and not get caught in the maze? So I've devoted my life to go further and faster with less effort. My next book is called Effortless Success. Alan Cohen, who talked to you yesterday, has a book. I just bought it in the airport, didn't even know it was out yesterday, read it halfway here to Denver yesterday before I came to Aspen, called Relax into Wealth. And so what we're all seeing now is it doesn't have to be as hard as most of us had made it. So we'll talk about how we can make it a little easier. Now, the promise I make, if you do the things I teach you, you can learn to double your income and double your time off and create more balance and fun in your life. And all of my students who work with me do that in 2 years or less. So it's easy to do if you put in the time and you make the commitment to do the work. Now, in my own life, as Mark shared with you this morning, we've sold over 110 million copies of our books that are in 47 languages right now. And this is little Marky Hansen that came from Waukegan, Illinois, and little Jackie Canfield who grew up in West Virginia. And when I grew up in West Virginia, we were the 48th worst state in terms of education in the country, and that's when there wasn't Alaska and Hawaii as states, so we were the bottom. I had a dysfunctional family. My mother was an alcoholic. My father was a workaholic and somewhat abusive. She divorced him when I was 6. to save the kids from getting beat up. And so if I can do it, you can do it. I graduated from the half of the class in my college that made the top half possible. So just want you to understand, it's not about brain power, but it's about how you use your brain to do the work. Okay. Mark and I also have a Guinness Book of World Records. You probably know that. We have 7 books on the New York Times bestseller list on one day. And I share with you not to impress you about me, but to impress upon you if a little kid from West Virginia who got a C in composition in college can go on and become a best-selling author, anybody in this area here can do anything as well. There's a check written to me for $1,130,328.35. Publisher that was the first check he ever wrote for $1 million. He put a smiley face in his signature. Mark and I got 4 of those checks that year. Our combined income each that year was over $6 million. Again, if I can do it, you can do it. Jim Rohn, great motivational speaker, says you can't hire other people to do your push-ups for you. Think about that. I can't hire anyone here to go to Gold's Gym and work out for me. You can't do my meditation for me. You can't do my visualization for me. All the things that I'm going to share with you are things you cannot delegate to others. This is the work. Harv said, there's work to do. You have to work on yourself. When I speak at the National Speakers Association, and people say, I want to be a speaker like you. I want to go out and make all money and affect the world and change people. What advice would you give me? And I said, the first thing is work on yourself. When I first learned about personal growth, I took 38 weekend workshops in 1 year. The only weekends I wasn't taking workshops was when there weren't any. Mother's Day, Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas, etc. Spent $17,000 out of my $38,000 income taking workshops back when they were like $100 for a weekend. But the point is, it's that level of work on yourself that opens up and takes off the clay and allows your natural genius to come forward. Buckminster Fuller, who Mark Victor Hansen talked about, said there's no such thing as a genius. He said some children are just damaged less. It means there's less clay on the golden Buddha or the golden Christ that lives inside of each of them. Now the first principle, if you're taking notes, this would be a good place to start. And if you're not taking notes, this would also be a good place to start. And that is to take 100% responsibility for your life and your results. Now, most of you have heard that before, but I would ask you a question. Have you ever blamed anyone for anything in the last year? We get mad, perhaps, at the president or the economy or the oil prices, or we blame other people for our not being successful. You literally have to give up all blaming and take 100% responsibility for your life, that you're creating it the way it is. You have to give up complaining. Complaining means I have a reference point for something I prefer that I'm not willing to risk creating. If I was complaining about my wife, it would mean that I have to have a reference point of someone better out there that I would rather be with, that I'm not willing to risk leaving my wife to go be with. Or I'd have to risk working with my wife and sharing with her there were things I didn't like about her that I would want her to change. And that might create a conversation that might be a little bit uncomfortable. But without taking that risk, I can't create what I want. If all the women in the world tomorrow died except for my wife, and I came to work, would I be complaining about my wife? No, I'd be going, hey, there's only one woman, and guess what? I got her. You only complain when there's a possibility of something better. Complaining tells you there's something I want I don't have, and when you complain, that's not an activity that's going to produce it. It's simply something that says I'm going to complain about it rather than do anything about it. Give up all justifying for why you didn't achieve your results, all defending your positions that don't work, and all excuse making. Now, I met this kid named Matty Christensen when he was 11 years old. We were interviewing him for one of our chicken soup books. And he said, if you look at the picture, you'll notice he has no arms past the elbow and no legs past the knee. He's got 2 prosthetic devices on his knee, from the knee down for his legs and his feet. And he's got a lacrosse stick appended to his arm, prosthetic device, which allows that to be his pitching hand and his catching glove. And at 11 years old, Matty's baseball team was number 2 in the state of New York, with him being the pitcher. So what that tells us is it doesn't matter what your condition is, you can still choose to create what you want and become a champion. Matty said to me when I interviewed him, he said, you have to give up all of your excuses and find a way. He says, if you're going to be successful, you have to be solution-oriented rather than a complainer. I was getting a seminar on success from an 11-year-old boy. Now, there are three things we have control over in your life: your thoughts, your images, and your behavior and your actions. You know, Harv does a seminar called The Millionaire Mind. It's the idea of our thoughts making and controlling our reality. So I want to look at thoughts with you for just a minute. We'll see how the weather holds out here. Hopefully we'll make it through this. What I'd like you to do is look down at the end of your hand. You'll notice there is a little line that goes across your wrist. Does everybody have like a little indentation, a little wrinkle that goes across there? And you'll have one on the other side as well. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to line those up perfectly and then put your hands together like that, but start them so that they're coming directly from that line. And if you're like most people, you're going to find that one of your hands is a little longer than the other. Most of you find that? Take your shorter hand and put it in front of your face. If your hands are the same length when you do that, take either hand and put it in front of your face. And here's what I want you to do. I'm from California, like Barbara, so we do a lot of weird stuff there. So I want you to look at your hand, and we're going to say out loud in unison 8 times, grow longer. Okay? We're just going to intend for our hand to grow longer. We're going to do it in unison. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Grow longer. 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 Okay, stop. Now line them up exactly the same as before, and notice what happened. How many of you found that it did get longer? Very good. So what this shows us is the power of our intention and the power of our minds over physical matter, starting with our body, and we see that we actually have that power over physical matter all throughout the universe. Now, the good news is we can do this. The bad news, in case there are any men thinking about this, is that so far the research has only been on the hands, okay? So I don't want you to waste a lot of time tonight with this. All right. Now, we've all heard of the internet. You've all used the internet. You've got Blackberries, and you send wireless telephone calls. We can call someone in Singapore right now and talk to them. How does that work? There's waves that go through the air, and there's what we call amplitude. How high does the wave go? And there's frequency. How often does it go up and down? And by controlling those amplitudes and frequencies, we can create information. We can encode information and send it across the world. We now know, a friend of mine coined the term the internet, a guy named Bob Scheinfeld, who wrote a book called Busting Loose from the Money Game. And he made the point that we literally, every thought we think is extended around the world like a giant email sent out over this thing which he refers to as the internet. And we know that it works, and we know it goes quite far for the following reason. There is research with the astronauts where they'll have astronauts up on the moon or up in lunar modules 250,000 miles above the Earth, and they'll have them open envelopes at random times, and there'll be a shape in there like a square or a circle or a pentagon or a parallelogram or a rectangle. And they'll look at it and they'll concentrate on it for several minutes while there are students back at Duke University in the parapsychology labs who will close their eyes, go into a meditative state, and see if they can receive what the astronaut's sending. And they get a high correlation between what they're sending, way beyond chance, in terms of them able to pick up this thought form without any amplification through technology or energy waves, radio waves, that kind of thing. So we know that our thoughts can travel 250,000 miles. So I love what Ralph Waldo Emerson said. He said, "Great men are they who see the spiritual thought is stronger than any material force, that their thoughts rule the world." Our thoughts literally travel all across the world. There's actually people that are now contemplating and projecting out from their work in quantum physics and neuroscience and metaphysics that 1 hour of inner work, working with visualization, working with the law of attraction, working with affirmations, working with the power of intention like you just did with Grow Longer, that 1 hour of that kind of work actually will produce the same results of 7 hours of physical labor in the world in terms of achieving your goals, whether they're financial goals like becoming a millionaire, or whether they're other kinds of goals like ending world hunger, that kind of thing. How many of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto, the Messages of Water? Great. So Emoto's work proves that when we think thoughts about water, it changes the molecular structure of the water. So they would have students send negative energy up to a bottle of water, like "you fool," "you idiot," and what would happen, they'll take that water and they will freeze it to 20 degrees below zero, put it in a petri dish, and then they will bring it out, put it under a microscope, and they will look at that water, and as it starts to melt, it forms crystals, or not. When you send negative energy, you get this kind of blobby black formation that occurs. When you send love and gratitude or thank you, you get these beautiful crystals that look like snowflakes. And so we know that one kind of energy, which we call negative critical energy, creates one form, and positive energy creates another. Then he said, how far does this intention to the water extend? So they took 10,000 Japanese, and over a 2-hour period, they sent love to all the water in the world. This was a couple of summers ago in July. And they took water samples the day before and the day after, and look what happened. Here's water taken from Lake Biwa. It's the largest freshwater lake in Japan. The day before, this nondescript kind of energy. 2 days later, we see these beautiful crystals having been formed. Here's the St. Croix River up near Minnesota and Wisconsin. And we see the day before and we see the day after. The day after we get these crystals. Here's the Mississippi River. We're halfway around the world and our thoughts are still affecting the water. And as you know from Masaru Emoto's work, your body is about 80 to 85% water. Although today you're probably more like 75% because you haven't been drinking enough. But the idea is we are water and our thoughts are affecting us and each other. And so what does this tell us about success? Every thought I think, they're not going to buy my product. They won't like my record. They're not going to give me a job. We're not going to find a parking space. You are literally sending out energy ahead of you that's pre-paving the highway you're driving down and setting up the kind of response you're going to get, especially when it deals with individuals, because you're telling them how to think. And then you walk in and they go, nah, they already have a determined kind of attitude toward you based on the thoughts you were thinking before you even met them. Back 30 years ago when I started taking workshops, we would literally bring people into we called it a laboratory or a workshop, sanctuary, and the day before we were having a meeting, we'd bring them in through a people mover and we'd interview them. What is it you need to know about me in order to make a decision? What are your hot buttons? What are your fears? What makes you decide yes? And we would get all this information from them because literally it's all available, because all the thoughts they've ever thought are out there as waveforms, like an archive that you could go to on Google or something to pull forward the information. So it's critical that we learn the power of our mind and use it. And I know most of you know this, but it's important to really see how far this extends. So again, your reality is not the cause of your thoughts and your feelings, but your thoughts and feelings are in fact what is creating your reality. Now, every thought you send is a vibration. And I want to share a story with you. Mark and I decided one day that we were going to sell 1 million books in one day. No one had ever done that up until then. Since then, J.K. Rowling's done it with, I think, the 3rd Harry Potter book. Now, at that point, there was no model to go after, no one to say, how did you do it so we can model what you did. We simply had a vision and a goal. And we started holding this in our mind every day. We'd see a picture, a New York Times headline, Canfield and Hansen sell 1 million books in one day. And we visualized it, we intended it, we put energy into it, we talked about it, we fantasized about it, we believed it was possible. About 35 days later, we're at this conference in New York. We're at this conference in New York where they have the American Booksellers Association convention. And I get on a bus after the convention to go back to the hotel. I sit down next to this woman, and she says, "You're Jack Canfield, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah," thinking she knows who I am. I'm pretty cool. And then she said, "It's your name tag." Kind of reduced my ego a little bit. And then she said, "What are you and Mark up to? You're the chicken soup guys, right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "We just decided to sell 1 million books in one day." She said, "Really? I can help you do that." As fast as I said it, she said, "I can help you do that." And I said, "Really, how?" She said, "I'm the buyer for the W.H. Smith bookstores." Now, if you've ever been at an airport, most of them have a W.H. Smith bookstore. And she said, "What we could do is put all your co-authors, along with you and Mark, in the East Coast around 6 in the morning, and we'll put you in New York and Boston and Washington and Atlanta and Miami, and we'll have you sign books for 2 hours. And then we'll put you on a plane and we'll fly you over to, like, Cleveland and Detroit and Chicago, and then we'll fly you again to maybe Salt Lake City and Dallas, and we'll take you all the way across the country. In the evening, you could be signing books in California and Portland, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. I said, why would you help us do that? She called me dummy at that point. She said, dummy, if I sold 1 million books in one day, don't you think that would make me look like a champion to my boss? I said, absolutely, I get it. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, you were just lucky. That was coincidental that you got this person to sit down next to you. I say, no. We sent out an email saying, Jack and Mark want to sell 1 million books in one day. Anyone who wants to play, please reply. And the way she replied was by sitting next to me on the bus. When you start using the law of attraction, you don't always attract to you the item. You don't get the car showing up in your garage. But what you do get is the resources, the strategies, the magazine articles, the books that people put in your hand, the seminars they tell you to take, and people like this sitting down next to you saying, hey, I can partner with you and we can make this happen. And that's happened over and over and over and over in our life. A couple of months ago, I said, I want to go to the Olympics in Beijing. I'd never been to the Olympics except in LA for one day. I said, I want to go. 30 days later, I'm walking into a company that I do some speaking for called Isogenics to give them a big motivational talk. And as I'm walking in the back of the room, this Chinese guy walks up to me and he says, are you Jack Canfield? And I said, yeah. He said, have you ever spoken in China? I said, Hong Kong, but not mainland China. He said, how would you like to do that? I said, great. I said, even more importantly, I'd like to get tickets to the Olympics. He says, oh, that's a done deal. I can get that for you. He walked up to me. So literally, you'll start having these people come into your life. There's actions you have to take, but it gets very, very exciting. So we want to use the internet. I just told you that, so we'll move on here. Now, you may remember in the movie The Secret, it talks about the 3 steps. Ask, believe, and receive. And I want to take this ask part a little deeper today. So the success principle 2 that I write about in my book is called Decide Exactly What You Want, which is the asking part. Having preferences, having desires, setting goals, having a vision, having objectives, becoming a millionaire, whatever it is that you want. Now remember in The Secret, it says talk about what you want, not what you don't want. I was interviewing a woman, a counseling client, and she said, I want you to teach me how to use the law of attraction to get the perfect guy in my life. I said, great. Describe your perfect guy. She said, oh no, I know exactly what I want. Just teach me how to use the law of attraction. I said, I will, but I want to make sure you've got this right. She said, okay. I want a guy that doesn't smoke, that doesn't screw around, that doesn't watch TV all weekend, that's not a sports maniac and never spends time in an... And she gave me 11 things she didn't want. It doesn't work. You have to focus on the positive, not the negative. Now here's a guy named Lou Holtz. Lou Holtz was the coach of the Notre Dame football team. Several national championships, many bowl game championships, and so forth. His recent book is called Wins, Losses, and Lessons. Now I wrote a book, or edited a book, a year ago called You've Got to Read This Book. And I interviewed 55 people, along with Gay Hendricks, about the book that had changed their life. Was there one book that changed your life? And he said, yes, there was a book that changed my life. It was called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. I see a few people are clapping. You've read the book. Exactly. Now in that book, David Schwartz says you should make a list of all the things you want to achieve before you die. And he recommends a list of 100 things. I know Mark mentioned that this morning. So Lou Holtz had just lost his job. He was an assistant football coach, lost his job, and he was home, and his wife had to go back to work as a radiologist to make enough money to feed them. And one day she came home and she said, I was in the supermarket and they had this book for sale called The Magic of Thinking Big. Why don't you read it? So he read it. He wrote out 107 goals that he wanted to achieve. And when his wife came home at night, he was real excited. And he showed it to her. He said, honey, look, 107 things that I want to achieve in my life. Thank you for this book. It's got me real excited. Why don't you read my list? So she read the list. Then she said, at the end of the list, she said, Lou, you need to add one more goal to the list. He said, what's that? She said, find a job. Find a job, Lou. We need to have a job. Now he had 108 goals. Lou's now in his 70s, and when I was interviewing him, he said, I've achieved 102 of those 108 goals. And those goals included winning a national football championship, eating dinner at the White House with the sitting president, meeting the Pope, going to the Vatican, appearing on the Johnny Carson late night show. All major goals. Landing a plane on an aircraft carrier was another one he had. Now, what he said was the goals give you direction. They give you a sense of movement in your life. John Goddard is another person we wrote about in the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book. He set 127 goals when he was 15. He's now in his 70s. He's achieved 115 of his 127 goals. So I really want to have all of you do that as a way to get clear about what it is you want in your life. If you've not yet done that exercise, sometime before you get home, on the plane home or whatever, start to think about what would be 101 goals that I want to achieve. When I was interviewing General Wesley Clark, he said it doesn't take any more effort or any more time to dream a big dream than it does to dream a small dream. Barbara today was talking about dreams of changing the world, of bringing your influence and your essence, your contribution out into the world. Big dreams. Mark talks about ending hunger and biofuel, and today we're doing the Live Earth, and we're talking about creating a sustainable planet that's ecologically feasible, that has social justice for all, and that has economic sustainability for everybody. Those are huge goals. Let your goals be as big as you want, but don't make them bigger than you want, because you don't have to. In other words, trust what you want to do. Walt Disney said, if you can dream it, you can do it. You're not allowed to have a dream that you don't have the capacity to create, either through your own efforts or the efforts of gathering a team together. How many of you have a GPS system in your car? How many of you know what a GPS system is? Yeah, it's simple. You get in my car, I have a Lexus, I get in there and I punch in an address. I can punch in an address in Colorado and it will provide a map for me all the way from where I live in Santa Barbara to Colorado. I don't have to know the way. And the same is true for you. Once you set a goal, the how will show up. Too many of us are concerned. We won't set the big goal because we don't see how we can do it. We don't want to look like an idiot. We don't want to commit to something and be foolish and be disappointed one more time. You do not have to know how. You only have to know what it is you want. And if you're clear about that, then the how will show up. I love this metaphor. I know Harv's used it in his seminars and I use it in mine too. It's that if you drive in the dark, and I put this into The Secret, you may remember, if you're driving in the dark, you only see the next 100 yards ahead of you. That's all you need to see. When Mark and I decided we wanted to write a book of stories, we didn't even know how to get an agent. We didn't know how to get a publisher. But later, we were about halfway through the book, we met an agent at a party. And we said, how do you get a book published? He said, I'll be your agent. Then we went to New York, and 24, 33 publishers, whatever it was, turned us down. And then we went, the agent gave us the book back and said, I can't sell it, you have to sell it. So we went to the Booksellers Association convention, because someone said if you go there, every publisher, there were 4,000 publishers there, they all have booths, most of them have their acquisition editors. So we went and did that. Finally, Health Communications decided to publish it. Now we didn't know how do you market it. So we asked 11 people, including Barbara DeAngelis, John Gray, who'll be speaking here. We asked Stephen Covey. We asked Ken Blanchard, who wrote The 1 Minute Manager. We asked Harold Bloomfield, who wrote the TM book on Transcendental Meditation. All had best-selling books. And they said, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. We did 5 things a day that they told us for 14 months. We did not hit a bestseller list for 14 months. But once we hit that list, as Mark said this morning, we were #1 on that list in the New York Times list for 3 years. And then when we brought out the second book, we didn't even think about that. Oh, second book, and then a third one, and a fourth one. Now 125 books, something like that in print. And then some people came and said, hey, we'd like to license your brand. For what? Dog food. I said, are you kidding me? We're going to retire on dog food. Chicken soup for the pet lover soul, cat food and dog food. So you never see the whole thing. But if you just start, I promise you the how will show up all along the way. People will give you books. They'll say to go to seminars. You'll meet the right people at the right time.